This episode of the CyberWire is made possible in part by CyberReason. They're coming for it. Your personal data, your intellectual property, your business. Cyber attackers are working to take what belongs to you and holding you to ransom. Defenders don't fear ransomware, they end it. With CyberReason, defenders detect and stop ransomware that even others miss, every time. A promise backed by a $1 million breach warranty. At CyberReason, they don't fear ransomware, they end it. Learn more at cyberreason.com/ransom. A CISA-issued Joint Advisory warns of threats and vulnerabilities at water and wastewater treatment facilities. CISA issues 22 other industrial control system advisories. Andrea Little Limbago from Interos on trends in the human element of security. Our guest is Gidi Cohen from Skybox with vulnerability and threat trends. And the governor of Missouri intends to prosecute the St. Louis Post-Dispatch to the fullest extent of whatever the law turns out to be. From the CyberWire studios at Data Tribe, I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Friday, October 15th, 2021. The U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, that's CISA, yesterday published a joint advisory warning of ongoing malicious activity by both known and unknown actors directed against water and wastewater treatment facilities. The advisory, issued in conjunction with the FBI, NSA, and EPA, emphasizes the threat of spear phishing as well as exploitation of outdated operating systems and vulnerable control system firmware. The advisory, while noting that the water and wastewater sector hasn't seen a higher rate of attacks than other critical infrastructure sectors, takes note of 5 incidents at water facilities since March of 2019. Quote, in August 2021, malicious cyber actors used Ghost variant ransomware against a California-based WWS facility. The ransomware variant had been in the system for about a month, and was discovered when 3 supervisory control and data acquisition, that's SCADA servers, displayed a ransomware message. In July 2021, cyber actors used remote access to introduce Zucano ransomware into a Maine-based WWS facility's wastewater SCADA computer. The treatment system was run manually until the SCADA computer was restored using local control and more frequent operator rounds. In March 2021, cyber actors used an unknown ransomware variant against a Nevada-based WWS facility. The ransomware affected the system's SCADA system and backup systems. The SCADA system provides visibility and monitoring, but is not a full industrial control system. In September 2020, personnel at a New Jersey-based WWS facility discovered potential Mac-up ransomware had compromised files within their system. In March 2019, a former employee at Kansas-based WWS facility unsuccessfully attempted to threaten drinking water safety by using his user credentials, which had not been revoked at the time of his resignation, to remotely access a facility computer. So, in total, 4 ransomware attacks and 1 insider threat case. Control systems have been in the news elsewhere this week. CISA yesterday released more than 20 industrial control system advisories. Operators would do well to take a serious look at them. Finally, in a long and odd story, Missouri Governor Mike Parson has denounced the St. Louis Post-Dispatch for what he characterized as the newspaper's hacking of the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, DISA. The Post-Dispatch had found some teachers' Social Security numbers coded into the HTML of a publicly accessible DISA website where citizens could check teachers' credentials. The paper informed DISA, waited until DISA had taken the information down, and then published its story. At a press conference yesterday, Governor Parson described the offending incident.
As many of you are aware, on October the 12th, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, DESE, was made aware of a vulnerable on one of its websites storing personal information of Missouri teachers. Through a multi-step process, an individual took the records of at least 3 educators, decoded the HTML source code, and viewed the Social Security number of those specific educators.
He went on to say that he was referring the hacker, that is, the Post-Dispatch reporter, to the Cole County prosecutor for alleged violations of Missouri laws that prohibit tampering with computer data.
My administration has notified the Cole County prosecutor of this matter. The Missouri State Highway Patrol's Digital Forensic Unit will also be conducting an investigation of all of those involved.
Governor Parson added that dealing with the incident could cost the citizens of Missouri $50 million.
The state is committing to bring to justice anyone who hacked our system and anyone who aided or encouraged them to do so, in accordance with the Missouri law allows and requires. A hacker is someone who gains unauthorized access to information or content. This individual did not have permission to do what they did.
What motivated the Post-Dispatch to do what it did? They were engaged in a political hatchet job, the governor says.
This individual is not a victim. They were acting against a state agency to compromise teachers' personal information in an attempt to embarrass the state and sell headlines for their news outlet.
KMBC 9 has made the governor's press conference available on the station's website, where you can listen to it and watch it in its entirety. Governor Parson has since doubled down via Twitter, claiming that the Post-Dispatch story places them on the wrong side of tampering with computer data, which is a Class A misdemeanor, unless the tampering involves theft of $750 or more, in which case it becomes a Class E felony. The governor's tweet also points out that tampering with computer data, computer equipment, or computer users is a civil tort. It's difficult to see why the governor believes a crime has been committed, or even why the Post-Dispatch's reporting involved what might be seen as hacking. After all, the reporter simply inspected the site's HTML, and the paper responsibly disclosed what they found there to the responsible state office. The governor's Twitter thread insists that there's more going on than just that. As the governor, or his writers, put it, quote, "We want to be clear, this CISA hack was more than a simple right-click. The facts, an individual accessed source code, and then went a step further to convert and decode that data in order to obtain Missouri teachers' personal information. This data was not freely available, and by the actor's own admission, the data had to be taken through 8 separate steps in order to generate a Social Security number." Sick, as the editors say. No one commenting in the Twitter thread seems to have any idea of what those 8 separate steps might have been, and the Post-Dispatch's story doesn't include any admission that we could find. Most of those covering or reacting to the governor's press conference aren't buying it. See Ars Technica for a representative discussion. Our staff has reached out to the governor's office for clarification. We'll let you know if we hear back from them. And now, a word from our sponsor, Looking Glass Cyber, a global leader in cybersecurity. In 2021, over 80 significant cyber incidents have taken place, and government entities are struggling to keep up. Cyber attacks harm victims' reputations, increase costs, and erode public trust. We need better security practices. Adaptive security is an approach that treats risk, trust, and security as a continuous and adaptive process that anticipates and mitigates constantly evolving cyber threats. Gartner discusses this concept and how government organizations should leverage adaptive security approaches in its recent report, Top Technology Trends in Government, Adaptive Security. Looking Glass can help your organization develop a continuous approach to monitoring your organization's attack surface and the attack surfaces for all your suppliers and vendors. Get in touch and access your complimentary copy of the Gartner report at lookingglasscyber.com/cyberwire. And we thank Looking Glass Cyber for sponsoring our show. The team at Skybox Security recently published a report tracking trends in operational technology vulnerabilities. It's probably not surprising that OT threats are on the rise. Gidi Cohen is CEO at Skybox, and he joins us with highlights from their report.
So there are a lot of very, very important trends, but I would probably focus on a few important ones. One is what we call the threat death. At the end of the day, organizations with their complex IT infrastructure, it can be cloud, virtual, physical environment, is growing in its complexity in an exponential way. Organizations are accumulating sometimes hundreds of thousands or sometimes millions of vulnerabilities or unpatched systems that actually put organizations at high risk. And this accumulation of what we call, again, threat debt is just growing over time. And with the acceleration of number of vulnerabilities, acceleration of the level of exploitation, the number of vulnerabilities exploited in the wild, ransomware attacks, and other type of threat vectors, it seems organizations need to start taking vulnerability management, managing this exposure in much more seriously way than before. So I would say that this is probably the most glaring insight of trends we see over the last few years that are just intensifying in 2021.
Was there anything in the data that you gathered that was surprising, anything that wasn't expected?
I would say that what seems to be one of the more interesting trends and more dangerous trends is actually to a subset of the vulnerabilities that we are tracking on OT, operational technology environments. They are looking at the technology used by healthcare facilities, by utilities, energy producers, manufacturing lines, right, supply chain related vulnerabilities. And there's a specific acceleration of number of exposures, number of vulnerabilities that are being found in those environments. So as our reports show, about 46% year-over-year growth of the number of new vulnerabilities reported on those environments is actually a very scary number because it accumulates fast. And a lot of those environments, there is not an easy fix or easy remediation to those types of exposures.
So what are your recommendations then, based on the information that you've gathered here? What sort of tips do you have for security professionals?
I would say, first of all, take vulnerability management much more seriously than before. I mean, the concept of scanning or finding vulnerabilities invented 25 years ago, right, mid-90s. And organizations ever since are scanning and getting more and more piles of reports that they're not doing anything about. Why? Because it's complex, requires a lot of collaboration, requires a lot of work, and traditional approaches to try to fix everything results in fixing nothing or fixing everything but way too late in terms of window of exposure. So we really believe that probably the best investment organization can make in actually tightening down their cyber risk is putting a vulnerability management program together, which will provide visibility, prioritization, track and drive remediation in a much more surgical and intelligent way, such an organization does not need to sweat every time there's a new vulnerability, as they can focus on what's critical, where they're most, where they're the most exposed, and therefore, if they fix or mitigate those vulnerabilities, where they have the biggest return on investment in risk reduction. So basically, putting a real vulnerability management program in place with commitment to execute on its finding on an ongoing basis.
That's Gidi Cohen from Skybox. There's a lot more to this conversation. If you want to hear more, head on over to CyberWire Pro and sign up for Interview Selects, where you get access to this and many more extended interviews. Next week, big changes come to cyber risk quantification. On October 18th, Threat Connect will release Risk Quantifier 6, which adheres to the FAIR standards and addresses the challenges of FAIR implementation by applying automation to the cyber risk quantification problem. Threat Connect RQ introduces new scenarios that enable analysts to leverage the FAIR framework in standard and semi-automated manners. Companies can use RQ to work within the FAIR framework as they do today, while also evolving their risk practice using the power of automation. RQ helps companies evolve and better adopt risk quantification across their organization. You can now scale your FAIR risk models to evolve your risk management program by leveraging your financial data and technical environment data using the RQ risk computation engine. The result? Meaningful reports for more informed and data-driven decisions with business stakeholders. Visit the Risk Threat Response Company at threatconnect.com to learn more. And I'm pleased to be joined once again by Andrea Little Limbago. She is Vice President of Research and Analysis at Interos. Andrea, it's always great to have you back. We often talk about all of the ones and zeros and the electronic stuff, and I know on the research side of the house, that's something that you are obligated to deal with a lot yourself. But there is a human side to this, and that's really important as well, yes?
No, absolutely. And this is something that we saw RSA a few years ago highlight the human element as their core theme. And it is something that we're increasingly seeing integrated, which is great. Better late than never is sort of how I look at it. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we still have a long ways to go. So there are some interesting aspects that we're starting to see. We're finally, I think, as an industry, moving a bit away from the notion of the human as the weakest link and just sort of relying on that as just the truth, but then just kind of taking that as it is and not thinking about, well, what can we do about that? And so, I feel like it's almost been like a cop-out that's been used to explain why we're not, evolving our technology and be able to point at the human instead of the technology as being what's, fallible. And so while certainly, humans make errors, but at the end of the day, that is something we need to take account of and then build systems that know that these kind of errors, know that these kind of behaviors are what humans do and build the technology to take that into account and build the defenses accordingly.
Yeah, I think that's a really fascinating aspect. This notion of using the human element as an excuse. I think it's still important to have guardrails on things. High walkways have railings, right?
That's right. Don't drink a hot coffee because it's going to tell you how hot it is.
Right.
Which might have been going too far, but yeah, absolutely, and that's where we are seeing a change away from that. And part of it, I do think, is that we are bringing some more disciplines into the cybersecurity infosec community, which is great. And then those folks that have been in the community and helping grow for a long time are really evolving. What they are doing as far as perhaps integrating usability, for instance, user experience as part of the software that's being built for security, and that's something that is so essential. We've seen usability and user experience be such a big deal on the tech side. It's how everything from using your finances more simply to every aspect of your life to calling a taxi. But security was kind of a bit behind on that. But that is changing. We really are starting to see a larger drive towards design and usability, both within everything from how we're training falls in the areas of gamification for training, as opposed to just having us click through PowerPoint slides and assuming everyone's going to actually be reading those and listening to them. So there's a lot of elements going on there where we're leveraging where technology still matters, but technology becomes part of the solution to help humans understand it and help inform human behavior and to build those guardrails in there as well.
Are you optimistic that we will be able to move past this mode of kind of finger pointing at each other and each side blaming the other for the security breaches?
I actually am, and I think in many ways there are days where it's very hard to be optimistic within information security, just with a constant barrage. But this is an area where I am. I do see whether it's at conferences and looking at how they have tracks for the human element now, looking at really some of the technical talks that still are very, very technical, but they also integrate social science and technical aspects from other fields as well to really help lead to greater innovation. And there's just, I think, a growing demand for that, both on the consumer side for wanting just easier tools and easier ways to figure it out, and frustration as well. You can just think about how hard it used to be to find some of the privacy tools in our phones, and some of that still is hidden. But it's starting to become almost a competitive advantage by some of the big tech companies basically saying that they provide privacy better than you, and here's how easy it is for you. And so when the market pressures start pushing it, I think that is a good sign for us.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, Andrea Little Limbago, thanks for joining us.
Great. Thank you, Dave.
Thanks to all of our sponsors for making the CyberWire possible, especially our supporting sponsor, SpyCloud, the leader in account takeover and fraud prevention. Learn more at spycloud.com/cyberwire. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. Be sure to check out this weekend's Research Saturday and my conversation with Michael DeBolt from Intel 471. We're discussing their research, how Groove Gang is shaking up the ransomware as a service market to empower affiliates. That's Research Saturday. Do check it out. The CyberWire podcast is proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our amazing CyberWire team is Elliot Peltzman, Trey Hester, Brandon Karpf, Peru Prakash, Justin Sabi, Tim Nodar, Joe Kerrigan, Carol Terrio, Ben Yellen, Nick Valecki, Gina Johnson, Bennett Moe, Chris Russell, John Petrick, Jennifer Iben, Rick Howard, Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here next week. Security teams rose to the challenge during a time of crisis, helping their organizations during an unprecedented period, shifting to suddenly support an entire remote staff while still keeping data safe, effectively overnight. Now, as organizations gradually and cautiously move out of adapt or die mode into the post-pandemic era, we can expect a second phase of digital transformation, resilience building. This presents an opportunity for security teams, an opportunity to reimagine data security. Code 42 believes that organizations should never compromise their speed of innovation or the safety of their data. That's why the Code 42 Insider Risk Management approach fundamentally shifts the data security mindset to focus on results that deliver business value. For resources on insider risk management, visit code42.com/showme.